The rain hammered Seoul's streets like bullets against concrete. Inside the dimly lit emergency room of Gangnam Medical Center, Hallie Davis pressed gauze against a knife wound on a stranger's shoulder, her thick fingers steady despite the blood pooling on the metal table. The man, a low-level street fighter with gang tattoos crawling up his neck, gritted his teeth but didn't scream. She'd seen worse. Growing up black and plus-sized in South Korea had taught her to handle stares, whispers, and worse. But nothing prepared her for the moment the ER doors exploded open and 6 men in black suits surrounded a seventh figure whose presence sucked all oxygen from the room. Park Ji-sung didn't walk, he commanded space. Even bleeding from a gash above his eyebrow, his tailored black coat hanging off one shoulder, he radiated the kind of danger that made seasoned nurses step back. But Hallie didn't move. She finished her current patient's dressing, washed her hands with deliberate calm, and met his eyes, dark, calculating, and now curious. "You're bleeding on my clean floor," she said in perfect Korean, her accent barely noticeable after 3 years in Seoul. His lips twitched. No one spoke to him that way. "Fix it." "Sir, you need to wait." "I don't wait." His voice was silk wrapped around steel. Hallie crossed her arms over her scrubs, her generous frame blocking his path to the supplies. "Everyone waits here. Pain doesn't care about your whatever you do." The bodyguards tensed. One reached inside his jacket, but Ji-sung raised a hand, his eyes never leaving hers. For the first time in 10 years ruling Seoul's underground, someone treated him like he was ordinary. It was intoxicating. "What's your name?" he asked quietly. "Nurse Davis to you." He smiled, a real one that transformed his scarred face into something almost human. "Then fix me, Nurse Davis." Like this video if you've ever stood your ground when everyone else backed down. Subscribe to Love and Tension because this story is about to get dangerous. 20 minutes later, Hallie sutured his eyebrow with practiced efficiency, her fingers gentle despite his reputation, which she'd pieced together from the terrified whispers of other staff. Park Ji-sung, the ghost of Gangnam, Seoul's youngest and most ruthless mafia boss, the man who controlled everything from the docks to the nightclubs, who made politicians sweat and rival gangs disappear, and he was staring at her like she was a puzzle he couldn't solve. "You're not Korean," he observed as she snipped the final thread. "Gold star for observation." She disposed of her gloves with a snap. "You're not a businessman." His eyes darkened with amusement. "What gave it away?" "Bullet graze on your ribs from last month. I remember the scar. Knife wound tonight. Bodyguards who carried the same guns as the Yakuza imports we treated last week." She met his gaze levelly. "Plus, everyone in this hospital is terrified of you except me. That tells me everything. Why aren't you afraid?" Hallie paused, her hand on the medical cart. The real answer was complicated. Years of surviving her ex-boyfriend's abuse back in Chicago, racist attacks on Seoul's streets, financial desperation that kept her working double shifts. Fear was exhausting, and she'd run out of energy for it. "Because I've survived worse than men who think power makes them special," she said simply. "You'll live. Try not to get stabbed next time." She turned to leave, but his voice stopped her, lower now, almost vulnerable. "What's your first name?" "Why?" "Because I want to know the name of the only person in Seoul who talks to me like I'm human." Something in his tone made her hesitate. Beneath the tailored menace, she glimpsed something familiar, loneliness so profound it hollowed you out from the inside. She knew that feeling intimately. "Hallie," she said quietly. "Hallie." He tested it like a prayer. "I'm Ji-sung, and I think I'm going to be coming back here. Try not to. Hospital beds aren't comfortable," but they both knew he meant something else entirely. Comment below, have you ever met someone and instantly knew they'd change your life? What happened? Ji-sung returned 3 days later, not injured, that would have been too obvious. He walked into the ER at 2 a.m. carrying an expensive box of French macarons and a problem. "My driver has food poisoning," he announced. setting the box on Hallie's nurse's station. She looked up from her charts, one eyebrow raised. And you need the ER for that because, professional opinion, I don't trust my regular doctor. Your regular doctor is probably on your payroll and too scared to tell you the truth. She stood, her curvy figure wrapped in purple scrubs that somehow made her look both approachable and formidable. Where is he? Outside, in the car. Hallie grabbed her stethoscope and followed him into the rain-slicked parking lot where a black Mercedes idled under flickering streetlights. The driver, a weathered man in his 50s, sat in the back seat looking genuinely ill, his face pale and clammy. She took his vitals efficiently, asked pointed questions about his symptoms, and diagnosed severe gastroenteritis within minutes. He needs IV fluids and rest. Bring him inside. Will he survive? Jisung asked, and the concern in his voice surprised her. Yes. He'll feel awful for 24 hours, then recover completely. She studied him in the amber glow of the streetlights. You actually care about your driver. He's worked for my family since I was 12. He taught me to drive on back roads outside the city when my father was too busy building his empire. Jisung's expression softened in a way she suspected few people ever witnessed. Some people matter. Bring him in. I'll get him situated. As she turned to head back inside, Jisung caught her wrist, not roughly but with enough intent to stop her. His hand was warm despite the cold rain beginning to fall. Have dinner with me. No. Why not? Because you're a mafia boss and I'm a nurse who's already escaped one dangerous man. I don't need another. Her voice was matter-of-fact, without judgment or fear. Plus, your world and mine don't mix. What if I want them to? Hallie looked down at his hand still circling her wrist, then back up at his face, handsome in a brutal way, scarred and sharp-edged, but with eyes that held surprising depth. Why? What do you want from me? I don't know yet, he admitted, but I haven't stopped thinking about you since you told me I was bleeding on your clean floor. You looked at me and saw a man, not a ghost story. Do you know how rare that is? The vulnerability in his confession made her chest tighten. She understood invisibility, how people looked through you, at you, around you, but never truly saw you. In Chicago, men had fetishized her body or dismissed her intelligence. In Seoul, locals stared at her skin like she was an exotic curiosity, but she'd learned to weaponize that invisibility, to move through the world unnoticed when she needed to survive. One dinner, she heard herself say, public place, and you don't touch anyone who looks at me wrong. I can handle myself. His slow smile could have melted steel. Deal. 3 nights later, Jisung picked her up in a different car, a Seville gray Hyundai instead of his usual armored convoy, and drove them to a small restaurant in Itaewon, where the owner greeted him warmly but without the usual terror. They sat in a corner booth with red vinyl seats and ordered jjajangmyeon like ordinary people. This place belonged to my grandmother, Jisung explained, pouring her tea with surprising grace. She escaped North Korea with nothing, built a life here, serving noodles and saving every won. My father turned her restaurant money into his first legitimate business, then other ventures. And you inherited the other ventures. I expanded them. He met her eyes directly. I won't lie to you, Hallie. I control the docks, the gambling houses, the protection networks across Seoul. I've hurt people who deserved it and some who didn't. I'm not a good man. Why are you telling me this? Because you asked for honesty and because... He paused, something flickering across his face that looked like pain. Because every time I'm near you, I feel less like the monster I've become and more like the person I was before this life consumed me. It's addictive. You're addictive. And I need you to understand that before this goes further. Hallie set down her chopsticks carefully, processing his words. Her ex-boyfriend back in Chicago had hidden his violence behind charm until it was too late, until she'd woken up in the hospital with broken ribs and no one who believed her story. But Jisung was offering transparency, laying his darkness out like cards on a table and giving her the choice to walk away. What happens if I keep seeing you? Enemies will notice. They'll try to use you against me. Your life will become complicated and potentially dangerous. What happens if I walk away? His jaw tightened. I'll have my men watch your building from a distance to make sure you're safe, and I'll never contact you again. You'll live your life and I'll go back to mine. But Hallie, his hand found hers across the table, thumb tracing her knuckles with devastating gentleness. I really don't want you to walk away. The smart choice was obvious. Run, create distance, protect herself from the inevitable chaos that surrounded men like him. But when she looked at Jisung, really looked, she saw something that mirrored her own soul. Loneliness, exhaustion from wearing masks, a desperate hunger for someone who understood the weight of surviving in worlds that didn't want you. I'm not walking away, she said quietly. But if your enemies come for me, I'm fighting back. I'm not some helpless damsel who freezes when things get dangerous. I've survived too much to become a victim again. His eyes blazed with something fierce and admiring. I wouldn't want you any other way. They finished their noodles talking about safer things. Her nursing school journey, his childhood memories of his grandmother's cooking, the strange beauty of Seoul at night. But underneath the casual conversation hummed an electric current of recognition. Two people who'd been invisible in different ways, finally seeing each other completely. When he drove her home, Ji-sung walked her to her apartment building's entrance in the working-class neighborhood of Guro-liu, where neon signs flickered in Korean, English, and Arabic above halal butchers and late-night convenience stores. He didn't comment on the cracked sidewalks, or the elderly woman selling wilted vegetables from a cart didn't make her feel small for living here. Thank you for tonight, she said at the door. Thank you for giving me a reason to be someone better. He touched her cheek, barely a whisper of contact, but it burned through her like wildfire. Sleep well, Hallie. She watched him disappear into the gray Hyundai, watched it glide away into Seoul's labyrinth of lights and shadows. Inside her tiny studio apartment, she sat on her second-hand futon and pressed her fingers against her chest where her heart hammered like it was trying to escape. This was dangerous, not just because of his world, but because she could feel herself falling towards something that terrified her. Genuine connection with someone who had the power to destroy her in ways her ex never could. Not with fists, but with the devastating intimacy of being truly known. Her phone buzzed, a text from an unknown number. I'm already addicted to you. Sweet dreams. J.S. Hallie stared at the message for a long moment, then typed back, Don't make me regret this. His response came immediately. I'll try my best, but I'm not used to being good at restraint. She smiled despite herself, set her phone aside, and tried to ignore the voice in her head whispering that this would end badly, because for the first time since arriving in Seoul, broke and alone, she felt something besides exhaustion and determination. She felt alive. Over the next 2 weeks, Ji-sung wove himself into her life with surprising subtlety. He didn't send flowers to the hospital. Too obvious, too public. Instead, she found her hospital locker stocked with expensive hand cream after he noticed her chapped knuckles from constant washing. Her elderly neighbor Mrs. Park's overdue rent mysteriously got paid when she was about to be evicted. The drunk businessman who'd cornered Hallie outside the convenience store stumbled away looking terrified after a brief phone call. Stop interfering, she told him during their third dinner at his grandmother's old restaurant. I'm not interfering. I'm ensuring you can focus on your work without unnecessary stress. Ji-sung, do you know what it's like to have power but no purpose? To control everything except the emptiness inside? Then you walk into my life talking about clean floors and treating me like I'm ordinary, and suddenly I have a reason to be better than the reputation I've built. Let me do this. Let me prove I can protect something good instead of just destroying things. The raw honesty in his confession made her throat tight. She reached across the table and took his hand, scarred knuckles, calloused palms that had done terrible things, but gentle when they touched her. I don't need a savior. I've saved myself too many times to count. But if you want to be part of my life, then be part of it. Not as my protector, but as As what? She hesitated, then chose truth. As someone I'm terrified of caring about, because I know how this story could end. His fingers tightened around hers. Then let's write a different ending. But even as he said it, Hallie saw the shadow cross his face, the knowledge that in his world, different endings were rare and usually written in blood. The first real crack in their careful bubble appeared 3 weeks into whatever they were building. Ji-sung arrived at Hallie's apartment at midnight, his usual composed mask fractured by something close to panic. Blood stained his dress shirt. Not his blood, she realized immediately from the splatter pattern. And his hands shook when he reached for her. "I need you to listen carefully," he said rough. A rival group, the Busan faction led by a man named Takeshi Reeves, they're escalating. "Hey, they hit one of my shipments tonight, killed 2 of my men. This is about to become a war, and I need you somewhere safe." Hallie pulled him inside her small apartment, locked the door, and guided him to sit on her futon. "Take off your shirt." "Did you hear what I said?" "I heard you. Take off your shirt so I can check for injuries while you explain what this means." Her nurse's training kicked in, overriding the fear trying to claw up her throat. He obeyed, stripping off the ruined shirt to reveal the muscular torso she'd sutured weeks ago, now unmarred except for old scars. She ran her hands over his ribs, checking for new wounds, her touch clinical but her heart racing. "I'm not hurt," he said quietly, "but they know about you now. Takeshi's people have been watching me, and they've seen us together. He's the type who'll use any weakness. I'm not your weakness. You're the only thing in this world that makes me feel human, Hallie. That makes you the most dangerous weapon anyone could use against me." His hands caught her wrists, pulling her closer until she stood between his knees. "I need you to leave Seoul for a few weeks. I have a safe house in Jeju Island. You can... I'm not running. This isn't about bravery. You're right, it's not." She pulled her wrists free and stepped back, crossing her arms. "It's about reality. I'm a Black woman in South Korea with a nursing visa that requires me to maintain employment. If I disappear for weeks, I lose my job. I lose my visa. I lose everything I've built here. And for what? To hide while you wage war? To stay alive? I didn't survive an abusive relationship and racism and financial devastation just to let fear control me now." Her voice stayed level despite the adrenaline flooding her system. "Tell me what precautions I need to take. I'm smart, Ji-sung. I adapted to your world faster than you expected because I've had to adapt my entire life to survive places that didn't want me. Use that instead of trying to hide me away like I'm fragile." He stared at her for a long moment, something shifting in his expression, frustration giving way to reluctant admiration. "You're impossible. I'm practical. There's a difference." Ji-sung stood, started pacing her small apartment like a caged predator. "Fine. New rules. You don't leave the hospital alone. Ever. I'll have 2 men stationed in the parking garage, Daewon and Sung Min. They're trustworthy and won't approach you unless there's immediate danger. You vary your route home every night. No patterns. You see anyone suspicious, you call me immediately." He pulled out his phone, typed rapidly, then showed her photos of a lean man with Yakuza-style tattoos. "This is Takeshi. Memorize his face. If you see him anywhere near you, run first and call me second." Hallie studied the photo. The cold eyes, the cruel mouth, the aura of violence even through a screen. What does he want? Territory? Respect? My head on a platter. Ji-sung's jaw clenched. And now, probably you, because he'll have figured out that hurting you is the fastest way to make me irrational. Then don't become irrational. That's what he wants. You don't understand what I'd do if someone hurt you. Yes, I do. She stepped closer, placed her hand against his chest, where his heart hammered like a war drum. You'd burn down the city. You'd unleash the monster you keep chained up for my sake. You'd become exactly what your enemies expect, and you'd lose yourself in the process. I understand perfectly, Ji-sung. That's why you need to promise me something. What? Promise me that if something happens, if Takeshi or anyone else comes for me, you don't let revenge destroy the man I've gotten to know, the one who pays his driver's medical bills and stocks my locker with hand cream and treats me like I matter beyond being a weakness to exploit. His expression cracked, vulnerability bleeding through. How can you ask me that? Because being addicted to someone means caring about who they become, not just keeping them close. She rose on her toes and kissed him, their first real kiss, soft and devastating, and tasting like fear and defiance. When she pulled back, his eyes were closed, his breathing uneven. "Promise me." "I'll promise to try," he whispered. "That's the best I can offer." It wasn't enough, but Hallie accepted it because she understood the futility of demanding restraint from someone whose entire existence was built on controlled violence. Instead, she spent the next hour listening to his detailed security plan, memorizing faces and procedures, transforming herself from potential victim to active participant in her own safety. When he finally left near dawn, Hallie stood at her window watching his car disappear into Seoul's awakening streets. She felt the weight of the choice she'd made, not to run, not to hide, but to stand in the blast radius of his world and trust her own strength to survive it. Her phone buzzed. A text from Ji-sung. "You're either the bravest woman I've ever met or the most foolish. I haven't decided which." She typed back, "Both. That's what makes me dangerous, too." His response took longer. "I'm addicted to you, Hallie, and it's destroying every wall I built to keep people out. I don't know if that's good or terrible." "Maybe it's both," she replied. "Maybe that's the point." The next 2 weeks passed in tense normalcy. Hallie worked her shifts at Gangnam Medical, hyper-aware of her surroundings in ways that made her shoulders ache from constant vigilance. She spotted Ji-sung's Ren, Daewon, and Sungmin easily enough, one always in the parking garage, the other rotating positions near the hospital entrance. They never approached her, maintained professional distance, but their presence was both reassuring and unsettling. Ji-sung visited when he could, always late at night when her shifts ended, always looking more exhausted than the time before. The war with Takeshi's faction was escalating. She could see it in the new scars appearing on his knuckles, the way he startled at sudden sounds, the darkness spreading behind his eyes like ink in water. "Talk to me," she said one night in her apartment, forcing him to sit still while she examined a fresh bruise along his ribs. "3 more of my men are in the hospital. Not yours. I'm keeping this away from your workplace, but it's getting worse. Takeshi's bringing in mercenaries from Osaka, professional killers who don't care about territory rules or civilian casualties. What does that mean? It means this stops being a targeted conflict and starts becoming chaos, random violence, bombings, public attacks designed to terrorize rather than win strategically." His hand found hers, gripped tight. "It means you're not safe anymore, even with precautions. Please, Hallie, let me send you somewhere protected." She wanted to argue, to insist again on her own strength and refusal to run, but she saw something new in his face, not just fear for her, but something deeper and more desperate. He was unraveling, the addiction he'd named consuming him from the inside, as keeping her safe and waging war pulled him in opposite directions. "1 week," she conceded quietly. "Give me 1 week to arrange coverage at the hospital and brief my supervisor. Then I'll go to your safe house in Jeju." "But Ji-sung," she cupped his scarred face between her hands. "You end this war fast and smart, not with the kind of violence that destroys you. Promise me you'll stay human." "I don't know if I can." "Try. For me." He pulled her into his arms, buried his face against her neck, and she felt his shoulders shake with silent intensity. This man who commanded an empire, who made politicians sweat and rivals disappear, was breaking apart because caring about her had given him something to lose. "I'm sorry," he whispered against her skin. I'm sorry I pulled you into this. I'm sorry I'm too selfish to let you go. I'm sorry. Stop! She held him tighter. I chose this. I chose you. Now we survive it together. But even as she said it, Hallie felt the cold certainty settling in her bones. This wouldn't end with them together. His world and hers were on a collision course, and something would have to shatter for either of them to survive. She just didn't know yet that it would be him. The attack came on her second-to-last shift before leaving for Jeju. Hallie was restocking supplies in the ER's medication room when the lights went out. Not just flickering, but complete blackness that swallowed the hospital's usual humming fluorescence. Emergency generators should have kicked in within seconds. They didn't. Her nurse's training steadied her panic. She felt for her phone, turned on the flashlight, and moved toward the door. That's when she heard the screaming from the main ER floor, followed by gunshots that cracked through the air like thunder. Everything happened in fractured seconds. She flattened against the wall, killed her phone light, controlled her breathing the way she'd learned after her ex's attacks. Slow inhales through the nose, exhales through pursed lips, forcing her heart rate down. More gunshots, patients screaming, staff shouting in Korean too rapid for her to parse. Then the medication room door burst open and a hand clamped over her mouth, yanking her backward. She started to fight, muscle memory from self-defense classes making her elbow jab backward towards her attacker's ribs. Don't scream, it's day one, Ji-sung's bodyguard's voice, urgent and low. We need to move, now. He released her mouth and she spun, seeing his face in the dim emergency lighting that finally flickered to life. Blood streaked his temple. What's happening? Takeshi's men. 4 shooters in the ER, 2 more blocking exits. They're looking for you specifically. Someone betrayed the boss's security rotation. He grabbed her wrist, started pulling her toward a service exit she'd never noticed. We have 90 seconds before they search back here. My patients are being evacuated by police. You stay, you die, and the boss loses the only thing keeping him human. Move. Hallie's mind raced through options, but Daewon was right. She couldn't help anyone if she was dead. She ran. They burst through the service exit into the hospital's loading dock area, where Sung men waited beside an unmarked van with the engine running. Hospitals surrounded, he reported tersely, but the boss created a distraction 3 blocks west. We go now, we might make it. Hallie climbed into the van's back seat as Daewon took the passenger side, and Sung Min gunned the engine. They peeled out of the loading zone just as more gunshots erupted from inside the hospital, closer this time, like whoever was hunting her had found the medication room empty. Where's Ji-sung? She demanded, gripping the seat as Sung Min navigated Seoul's back alleys at terrifying speed, creating the distraction, drawing Takeshi's attention away from you. Her stomach dropped. What kind of distraction? The bodyguards exchanged a glance she didn't like. The kind that makes Takeshi focus on him instead of you, Daewon said carefully. Take me to him. No. Boss's orders. I don't care about his orders. If he's putting himself in danger to protect me, I deserve to know what's happening. Her voice cracked with fear and fury. Sung Min's eyes met hers in the rearview mirror, something like sympathy flickering there. Miss Hallie, with respect, what the boss is doing right now, you can't stop it. And if we bring you there, we ruin the whole point of his sacrifice. Sacrifice. The word hit her like a physical blow. What are you talking about? The war with Takeshi escalated beyond territory, Daewon explained quietly as they merged onto a highway heading south out of Seoul. It became personal. Takeshi wants the boss dead, and he'll burn the city to make it happen. So the boss made a choice. What choice? Another loaded glance between the bodyguards. We're taking you to a safe house outside Busan, Sung Min said tersely. You'll stay there under protection until... Until what? Until it's over. Hallie's breath came short and sharp. She understood subtext, had survived too many dangerous situations not to read between lines. Ji-sung was ending this war tonight, one way or another, and he'd sent her away so she wouldn't have to witness whatever he planned to become. Turn this van around. We can't. Turn it around or I'll jump out at the next stoplight. Miss Hallie. Day One twisted in his seat, his expression pained. The boss told us if you fought, if you demanded to go back, we should give you this. He handed her a sealed envelope, expensive paper that smelled faintly of Ji-sung's cologne, cedar and smoke and something darker. Her hands shook as she opened it. Inside, his handwriting, sharp and elegant. Hallie. If you're reading this, you know I've sent you away. You're angry. You feel betrayed. You think I'm treating you like a damsel instead of the strong woman you are. You're right to feel all of that. But understand this. Every moment with you has been the best and worst thing that ever happened to me. Best because you saw me as human when everyone else saw a monster. Worst because I fell so deeply addicted to you that I lost my edge, made mistakes, let my guard down in ways that put you in danger. I'm destroying myself trying to keep you safe while waging war. I can't do both, so I'm making a choice you'll hate but will eventually understand. By the time you read this, I'll have met with Takeshi under a flag of truce. I'm offering him everything, my territory, my operations, my surrender, in exchange for your safety. He thinks he's won. That's what I need him to think. But Hallie, there's no such thing as surrender in my world. There's only the appearance of it, long enough to position the knife at your enemy's throat. This ends tonight, one way or another. Either I walk away having neutralized the threat to you, or I don't walk away at all. I need you to survive. I need you to go back to nursing, to helping people, to being the light in a dark world. You asked me to promise I'd stay human. I can't keep that promise while fighting this war. But I can make sure my last act protects the one person who made me feel human. I'm addicted to you, and it's destroying me. So I'm destroying everything else first. My empire, my reputation, maybe my life, to make sure you get to keep yours. Don't come back to Seoul. Use the account information in the second envelope, Daewon has it, to start over wherever you want. America, Europe, Japan, anywhere but here. Build the life you deserve. I'm sorry I fell in love with you. I'm sorry I'm not strong enough to be what you need. I'm sorry this is how our story ends. But I'm not sorry I met you. You saved me in ways you'll never fully understand. Be brave. Be brilliant. Be free. Ji-sung. P.S. Don't mourn me. I was dead long before you came into my life. You just made me feel alive for a little while. That's enough. Hallie's vision blurred as tears streamed down her face, hot and furious and devastating. When? When did he meet with Takeshi? 20 minutes ago, Daewon said softly, at an old warehouse by the Han River. By now, it's already... The van's radio crackled, cutting him off. A news report in rapid Korean, but Hallie caught enough words to freeze her blood. Explosion, warehouse, casualties, Park Ji-sung, presumed dead. No! The word ripped from her throat. No! 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 Miss Hallie, Sungmin's voice broke. I'm sorry. The boss planned this. He rigged the warehouse before the meeting. Takeshi and his top people are dead. But so is... You don't know that. Bodies. Did they find bodies? The blast was too intense. They won't find identifiable remains. Which meant maybe, possibly, hopefully, he's not dead, Hallie said fiercely. He's too smart for that. This is a trick, a play to make Takeshi's remaining people think they've won. He's alive somewhere, hiding until it's safe to... But even as she said it, she saw the truth in the bodyguards' faces. Whatever Ji-sung had done, he'd meant it as a final move, a complete destruction that erased him from the board along with his enemies. She crumpled against the van's seat, the letter clutched in her fists, and sobbed like something vital had been carved out of her chest, because that's exactly what had happened. She'd survived her ex's fists and Seoul's racism and poverty's grinding weight, but this, loving someone who loved her back enough to erase himself for her safety, This might actually break her. "Take me to Busan," she whispered when she could speak again. "But I want updates, every day. If there's any sign he's alive, any hint, we'll tell you," Day One promised. The boss left instructions. "We protect you now the way we protected him. You're our responsibility." The van carried her south through the night, away from Seoul's glittering skyline and the man who'd become her addiction. She clutched his letter and watched the city disappear behind her, wondering if love always felt like this. Beautiful and brutal, saving and destroying, all at once. The safe house outside Busan was a modest two-bedroom cottage overlooking the sea. So different from Seoul's urban chaos, it felt like a different country entirely. Hallie spent the first week in numb shock, moving through each day like a ghost. Daewon and Sung-min maintained a professional distance, guarding her perimeter but giving her space to grieve. Because that's what this was, grief. Even without a body to bury or a funeral to attend, she mourned Ji-sung the way you mourn someone who'd fundamentally changed who you are and then vanished, leaving you to figure out how to exist in a world that felt emptier than before they arrived. The news reports told conflicting stories. Park Ji-sung, notorious crime boss, killed in explosion at Han River warehouse. Takeshi Reeves and 6 members of his organization also dead. A 7th body, badly burned, identified through dental records as one of Ji-sung's top lieutenants. Police investigations ongoing. Speculation about power vacuums and potential gang wars erupting across Seoul. But no confirmed death for Ji-sung himself. No body. Just absence. "He planned this perfectly," Hallie told Sung-min on day 8, standing on the cottage's small porch, watching fishing boats dot the horizon. "Fake his death, eliminate his enemies, force me away so I'd be safe. Smart, efficient, completely controlling. He loved you," Sung-min offered quietly. "Love doesn't trap people in choices they didn't make. Love doesn't make unilateral decisions about someone else's future." She turned to face him, her eyes red-rimmed but clear. "I told him I wasn't his weakness. I told him we'd survive this together, and he didn't trust me enough to let me help. With respect, Miss Hallie, there was no way to survive together. Not with Takeshi's escalation. The boss chose the only path that kept you alive. By dying himself? Maybe. Or by disappearing so completely no one can use you against him ever again." Sung-min's expression was carefully neutral. If the boss is alive somewhere, he's living as someone else entirely. New identity, new life, no connection to Seoul or his empire. That's the only way the sacrifice works. Holly's chest constricted. "So, even if he's alive, he's gone? Is that what you're saying?" "I'm saying the Park Ji-sung you knew doesn't exist anymore. Whether he's dead or reborn as someone new, the result is the same for you. You move forward. You build the life he wanted you to have." It was the truth she'd been avoiding, but hearing it spoken aloud made it real in a way that hollowed her out. Ji-sung had loved her enough to erase himself from existence, either literally through death or figuratively through complete reinvention. Either way, she'd lost him. "What am I supposed to do with that?" she whispered. Sung-min hesitated, then spoke with unusual gentleness. "Live, Miss Hallie. Live fully and bravely the way you already were before you met him. Honor his sacrifice by becoming everything he saw in you. The brilliant nurse, the strong woman, the person who survived impossible things. That's what he wanted. That's why he did this." In the second envelope Day One had given her, Holly found documentation for a bank account in her name containing enough money to start over anywhere in the world. Not an obscene amount that would draw attention, but enough for several years of financial security. There was also a new passport, her real information but expedited processing, and contact details for immigration lawyers in 3 countries. The practical preparations of a man who'd thought of everything except giving her a choice. She spent another week in the cottage, processing the anger and grief in waves that left her exhausted. But slowly, like dawn breaking over the ocean, she felt something else emerging, a fierce determination not to let his sacrifice define her entire existence. He'd wanted her to be free. Fine, she'd be free in ways that honored her own strength, not just his protection. On day 16, Holly called the hospital in Seoul. Her supervisor, relieved she was safe after the attack, offered her a leave of absence, but Holly surprised herself by resigning instead. "I'm starting over," she explained. "Somewhere new, but thank you for everything." She researched nursing positions in 3 countries, applied to programs that intrigued her, and started learning basic Japanese during her morning coffee on the porch. If she was rebuilding, she'd rebuild on her own terms, not running from Ji-sung's world, but actively choosing something better. Daewon and Sung Min received orders from somewhere, they never revealed who issued them, to continue guarding her until she was settled in her new location. The boss's final instruction: make sure you're safe before we disappear too. Where will you go? Wherever we're needed next. The organization still exists, just under new leadership. We'll serve, protect, continue. It's what we do. Will you tell me if you hear anything? About him? The bodyguards exchanged their signature glance. If there's anything to tell, you'll be the first to know. It wasn't a promise, but it was something. Holly accepted it. If you've made it this far, comment below. Would you want someone to sacrifice everything for you, or would you rather fight together regardless of the outcome? Subscribe to Love and Tension for more stories that tear your heart apart. 3 months after the explosion, Holly boarded a flight to Vancouver, Canada. She'd accepted a position at a community health clinic serving immigrants and refugees, work that aligned with her values and utilized her experience surviving between cultures. She made friends cautiously, dated no one, and built a life that felt authentic even though it was shaped around a missing piece. But late at night, when the city quieted and rain pattered against her apartment windows, she'd pull out Ji-sung's letter and read it again. The paper had softened from handling, his words etched into her memory, but she needed the physical connection, proof that what they'd shared had been real, even if it ended in his complete disappearance. "I'm addicted to you, and it's destroying me." She understood now. Loving him had changed her irrevocably, made her question every assumption about strength and safety and survival. She'd wanted to fight beside him, to prove love could coexist with danger, but he'd believed the only way to save her was to remove himself entirely from her life. Maybe he'd been right. Maybe together they would have destroyed each other in spectacular fashion, dragging each other down until nothing remained but casualties and regret. His sacrifice, brutal as it was, had given her the chance to become someone she'd never imagined, not just surviving, but thriving beyond the constraints of fear and scarcity. But God, it hurt. It hurt in ways that made her ribs ache and her throat close when she wasn't careful. It hurt knowing someone had loved her enough to erase himself, had trusted her strength enough to leave her alone with his absence. 6 months after arriving in Vancouver, Hallie was working a late shift at the clinic when a patient arrived with a knife wound. Superficial but needing sutures. He was Korean, early 40s, with workers' calluses and nervous eyes. As she cleaned the wound, he spoke in heavily accented English. "Thank you, nurse. You very kind. It's my job." "How did this happen?" "Accident. Working late. Slip with knife." The lie was obvious, but she didn't push. As she sutured, the man studied her face with an intensity that made her uncomfortable. "You are Hallie? Hallie Davis?" Her hands froze. "How do you know my name?" "A friend, long time ago. He say if I ever in trouble, find you. Say you best person, strong heart." The man's eyes welled with tears. "He say you save him, make him human again, even for short time." Hallie's breath caught. "Who? Who told you this?" "Cannot say name. Too dangerous. But he want you know, The man reached into his pocket with his uninjured hand and pulled out a small object wrapped in cloth. "He want you have this. Say it all he can give now." She unwrapped the cloth with trembling fingers and found a small wooden carving, intricate and beautiful, a crane in flight, traditional Korean artistry, the size of her palm. On the base, carved in English letters, "Be Free, J.S." When? When did he give you this? 2 weeks ago, in Seoul. He different now, different face, different name, but same eyes, same sad eyes. The man's voice dropped to a whisper. He watch you sometimes. Make sure you okay. Make sure his sacrifice worth it. Hallie's vision blurred. He's alive. And not alive. He died to save you. Man now is shadow, ghost. But he see you thrive, and he know he choose right. The patient stood carefully, his sutures complete. No more contact. Too dangerous. But he want you know, you free him too. His death, his gift, it free him from life that destroy his soul. You both free now. Before she could respond, the man slipped out of the clinic and disappeared into Vancouver's rainy night, leaving her standing in the examination room clutching a wooden crane and crying silent tears that tasted like salt and revelation and bittersweet relief. He was alive. Somewhere, somehow, Ji-sung had survived his own sacrifice and become someone new, and he was watching from a distance, ensuring her safety without ever re-entering her life, respecting the boundary his disappearance had created. It was the cruelest kindness, the most loving abandonment, the perfect torture of knowing he existed but remained unreachable, living proof that some loves are too destructive to sustain, but too powerful to ever truly end. Hallie returned to her apartment that night and placed the wooden crane on her windowsill where morning light would find it. She thought about writing him a letter, though she had no address, no way to reach him, just to say she understood now. She understood that his addiction to her and hers to him had been the kind that burned too bright to last, that would have consumed them both if they'd tried to force it into normal shapes. Instead, she lived. She worked at the clinic, helped refugees navigate Canada's healthcare system, built friendships with people who knew nothing of her soul life. She dated occasionally, though no one ever made her feel the way Ji-sung had, like every nerve ending was alive and terrified and completely, devastatingly known. And sometimes, on quiet nights when Vancouver's rain mimicked Seoul's patterns, she'd catch a glimpse of someone in the distance, a figure that moved with familiar predatory grace, watched with eyes that might have once been dark and calculating and devastatingly gentle when they looked at her. She never approached, never confirmed, because understanding his sacrifice meant accepting its completeness. They'd both died to save each other. Him, literally or figuratively, her by leaving Seoul and becoming someone new. They'd been addicted to each other, and the only cure had been total separation, but the crane remained on her windowsill, proof that some loves destroy you and save you in the same breath, that the strongest connections sometimes require the deepest distances, that being free doesn't mean forgetting. It means carrying someone with you as you build a life they made possible by walking away. 1 year after the explosion, Hallie volunteered at a charity medical event in Seattle, just across the border, close enough for a weekend trip. The event served homeless populations, offering free health screenings and basic care. She'd become good at this work, at seeing people others overlooked, at offering dignity alongside medical treatment. Near the end of her shift, a man approached her station. He wore worn clothes that suggested street living, a baseball cap pulled low, and several days of stubble that obscured his features. But when he sat down and looked up at her intake form, she saw them, those eyes, dark, calculating, and in that fraction of a second before he controlled his expression, devastatingly gentle. Time stopped. Her pen froze on the intake form. Every instinct screamed to say his name, to reach across the table, to demand answers about the years she'd spent grieving and rebuilding, and learning to exist around the absence he'd left. But his almost imperceptible headshake stopped her. Don't. Please don't. So Hallie took his vital signs, blood pressure slightly elevated, pulse strong and steady, and pretended he was just another anonymous patient. Any current health concerns? She asked, her voice professional despite the way her hands shook. Old injury. Chest. Sometimes hard to breathe. His voice was different, rougher, accented differently, like he'd been practicing a new identity so thoroughly it had become real. But underneath, she heard the ghost of Park Ji-sung. She examined him carefully, her fingers finding the scar tissue she'd once sutured above his eyebrow, now disguised with careful makeup. This old injury. How'd it happen? Explosion. Year ago. Lucky to survive. Lucky, she repeated hollowly. Her fingers moved to his ribs, pressing gently, feeling for damage. And there, fresh scars, burn tissue, evidence that the explosion had been real and he'd barely escaped. You should see a specialist. This tissue needs monitoring. Can't afford specialists. Then come back here next month. We'll monitor it for free. His eyes met hers, a question, a plea, a desperate hope she couldn't fully interpret. Will you be here? Yes. The word caught in her throat. I'll be here. They stayed frozen in that moment. Two people who'd loved each other into mutual destruction, who'd died and been reborn into separate lives, now facing each other across an impossible divide. She wanted to scream at him, wanted to kiss him, wanted to demand why he'd chosen this living death instead of trusting they could survive together. But she saw the answer in his face. The scars weren't just physical. Whatever had happened in that warehouse, whatever he'd done to eliminate Takeshi and fake his death, had broken something fundamental. He'd become the monster he'd always feared, crossed lines he couldn't uncross. And his sacrifice wasn't just about her safety. It was about protecting her from what he'd become. Take care of yourself, she whispered. You too. He stood slowly, like his ribs still hurt. You're doing good work here. Important work. Your friend would be proud. My friend died in an explosion. Something flickered across his face. Pain, relief, gratitude that she understood the fiction they needed to maintain. Then his death wasn't wasted. Look at you now. He walked away before she could respond, disappearing into the crowd of volunteers and patients. Hallie sat at her station, fighting the urge to chase him, to break the careful illusion, to drag him back into her life regardless of consequences. But she didn't, because his sacrifice had been about giving her freedom, and chasing him would negate everything he'd given up. So she finished her shift, packed up her supplies, and returned to Vancouver with the knowledge that he existed somewhere in the shadows, alive but unreachable, watching but never approaching, loving her enough to stay dead in every way that mattered. That night, she found a note tucked into her medical bag, his handwriting, that distinctive sharp elegance she'd memorized from his letter. Seeing you thrive makes everything worth it. Stay brilliant. Stay free. Forget me. The ghost. She didn't forget, but she did continue building her life, got promoted at the clinic, started teaching trauma-informed care to other healthcare workers, published an article about treating marginalized populations with dignity. She became someone she barely recognized from her scared Chicago days or her struggling Seoul nights. And sometimes, maybe once every few months, she'd catch a glimpse of a figure watching from a distance. At the grocery store, outside the clinic, once at a park where she'd gone to read on her day off. Never close enough to confirm, never approaching, just present, like a guardian shadow ensuring her safety from afar. She never acknowledged these sightings, never tried to make contact, because they'd made an unspoken pact the day he'd faked his death. Their love was too powerful and too destructive to exist in the same space. So they lived parallel lives, connected by invisible threads and mutual sacrifice, each carrying the other's ghost, while building separate futures. It was the saddest kind of love story, the most honest kind of sacrifice, the only ending that made sense for two people whose addiction to each other had been so complete it required complete separation to survive. Years later, when Hallie was featured in a nursing journal for her work with immigrant populations, she kept the magazine on her coffee table for weeks, and one morning she found it moved slightly, open to her article, with a small check mark in the margin beside her photo. Nothing else, just that tiny mark that said, "I see you. I'm proud. I still love you from the shadows." She never found out how he'd gotten into her apartment, never caught him on any security footage, but the message was clear. Park Ji-sung, or whoever he'd become, was still out there, still watching, still protecting, still destroyed by his addiction to her, but managing it through distance and silence, and the occasional ghost-like reminder that love doesn't always mean being together. It means wanting the other person to flourish, even if you can't witness it up close. Final question for you. Is a love that destroys itself to save both people still love, or is it the most profound sacrifice? Drop your thoughts in the comments. And if this story made you feel something, anger, sadness, understanding, frustration, share it with someone who needs to hear about complicated love that chooses freedom over possession. This is Love and Tension, where stories don't always end happily, but always end honestly. Subscribe if you want more tales that remind you love is messy, beautiful, devastating, and sometimes the bravest thing we can do is walk away. Hallie Davis continued thriving in Vancouver, building a legacy of compassionate care and cultural competency that changed how her clinic treated marginalized patients. She never married, though she had companions and friendships that filled her life with meaning, and on her windowsill, the wooden crane remained, a permanent reminder that she'd been loved so completely that someone had unmade themselves to ensure her freedom. Park Ji-sung, if that identity even existed anymore, lived in the spaces between shadows, a man who'd chosen death over endangering the one person who'd made him feel human. His empire had crumbled. His name had become a cautionary tale, but somewhere in that destruction, he'd found a twisted kind of peace, the peace of knowing his sacrifice had worked, that Hallie was safe and thriving and free from his world's poison. They never spoke again, never touched again, never confirmed the occasional sightings that might have been him or might have been wishful thinking, but the connection remained, invisible, unbreakable, sustained by mutual understanding that some addictions can only be managed through complete abstinence. And in that absence, they'd given each other the greatest gift possible, the freedom to become who they were always meant to be, unshackled by the beautiful, terrible love that would have destroyed them both if they'd been foolish enough to believe it could exist in daylight. The end.